very good question. As I'm sitting here mulling over what's important to me, I'd like to break it up into a couple of things. So one, as the Black mommy activist, it's important for me to do the type of work where I can ensure that African-American young boys, young men can get home safely. It's important to me to make sure that my work is being used to open up spaces where we can have these conversations. Second, what's important to me is making sure that I make a space for deep engagement. Am I helping to facilitate conversations about the ways in which race and peace are used to help facilitate a conversation around social justice? As a Black mommy activist, that's not my full-time job, right? It's my full-time mission and my calling as someone who, along with my husband, helped to co-parent and co-raise two young men, but I'm also a professor at Loyola University. I teach in communication in African and African-American studies, and I also founded the Carson Institute for Race, Peace, and Social Justice, which is an institute out of Loyola. So making space to have these conversations, whether on a personal level or a professional level, that's really what's most important.
And when you say for Black boys to get home safe, are you saying due to the outbreak of Black on Black crime, you concerned that when they're out there, they'll get killed or hurt by other Black gang members and things like that?
No, I actually push back against the notion of Black on Black crime, because there's a lot of history around that terminology. We don't say white on white crime. We don't say Asian on Asian crime. We only have that kind of terminology when it comes to the Black community, and it has a lot of stigma attached to it. Research shows that more crimes are committed within communities. So as it's true for the Black community, it's true for all communities. So no, I'm not as concerned that they're going to be killed or shot or maimed or attacked by a member of a gang. I won't say another gang member, since my sons are not in gangs, but by a gang member. My bigger concern is the ways in which systemic racism work against African-American young men, from stop and frisk to being judged unfairly, to the ways in which they move in the classroom, in the stores, and in public spaces and spheres. So I can protect them from gang members by looking at what communities they go to into. Are they in college? Are they out in high school? Are they moving in certain ways? But this perception of young Black men being dangerous is not something I can fight against. Like, that gets into the hearts and minds of people. And that's a bigger kind of work that must be done.
Which are you more concerned about with Black boys traveling into communities and getting killed, robbed, or raped, or whatever by other Black boys, or systemic racism or police brutality or something? Which one are you more concerned about? Since we all know that the Black on Black thing does happen, and right now it's just out of control. Chicago, Los Angeles, here where I'm at, Gary, Indiana, all over the place. Which one are you more concerned about? Since now that they have defunded the cop and everything, the Black people gone crazy. Which one concerns you the most?
Well, I want to unpack a little bit what you're saying, because I actually would push back against, the Black people have gone crazy. Like, we have not gone crazy.
How about gone wild?
Well, I would say we've gone as wild as everyone has gone. If we take a look at what's happening in society at this moment, not just within the Black community, there are more incidences of crime and violence and misbehavior across the board. It's happening throughout society. The last 2 years, dealing with this global pandemic and people being shut in and all the messaging around that, we're seeing more incidences happen when people are driving. We're seeing more mass shootings. We're seeing more violence happening within one another. So we know that is taking place. So it's not that just Black folks have gone wild. It's the same thing that's happening. It gets amplified in our community because it gets covered more. You asked me which one was I more concerned about them dealing with violence within their community. Since I live in Baltimore City, our homicide numbers have gone up. We are talking about the fact that we're dealing with a different pandemic here, not just COVID-19, but also the pandemic of violence. Therefore, Black folks across the board actually are dealing with a syndemic, which a syndemic is defined as having multiple pandemics pandemics come at you at one time. It's not an either or, it's an and both. So am I concerned about my boys moving into certain communities where I know violent crimes are happening? Yes, I'm concerned about that. I'm also concerned about them going off to college and being stopped by the cops and they're just simply driving. In one incident, there's a chance that they might be harmed, and in another incident, there's a greater chance when you come into contact with police officers who have weapons. The defund the police movement, as you brought that up, has been largely unsuccessful. Yeah. Like, we talked about it and we marched about it, and those who protested about it did. But if you look at the work of Ruthie Wilson Gilmore, of Angela Davis, of Miriam Kaba, the work to defund the police has not been successful. Right. So what is the problem? It's the fact that some cops have been involved in what they call a slow down work stoppage. So they get calls from certain communities and they're not responding. We have police officers who are quitting, not just because of, quote, the defund the police movement and Black Lives Matter, but also around not having to take the vaccine. That there are a couple of factors at work.
Were you in support of defunding the police?
In certain communities, yes. So if you are putting, well, let me be clear, in Baltimore City, if you're putting $54 million into the police force, but you are not putting money into setting up counseling services, setting up folks to come into the communities to help out, to set up a 311 call where if there's a problem, the police are not the first line of defense for a wellness check, the first line of defense when there's something happening in schools. I was saying take some of the money away from the police, not dismantle, but reduce some of the funding and put the money into support services so the police don't have to answer every call from, hey, my son's going crazy, to, hey, my son's cutting school. Like, are there other services that can support the police where the police are dealing with more violent crimes, but the day-to-day wellness checks could be done by other people in the community?
And so now that they have defunded the cops and the young Black folks are smashing and grabbing, so they call it, they are attacking Asian people, they're breaking and killing white people, Black children. They're like going, wow, do you regret supporting that at all? And do you believe that we need to refund the cops and bring them back?
Again, I'm going to go back to what the research is saying. You are saying that we've defunded the police. That was not successful. We actually did not successfully defund the police. You're talking about Black folks smashing and grabbing. You're talking about, I mean, are you even aware of all the news stories about the rising rates in crime happening? Like, it's really interesting that this amplification of what's happening in our community, as if it's the only community that's seeing a rise in violent crime. It's happening across the board. The defund the police movement was not successful. The communities that were able to reduce funding have in the last year almost doubled the funding back, from Chicago to Baltimore to Atlanta. They've been going forward, giving more money back to the police because they're trying to find this balance. I'm not saying, and I did not say, nor do I believe that we dismantle the police. That actually is not my stance. I do think when you're giving $500 million to the police and you're not putting any support services in place, that's not successful. It's not successful in Baltimore City, which is predominantly Black. It's not successful in the Appalachian areas of Virginia, which are predominantly white. It's not successful out in Nevada in the predominantly indigenous communities. In any sense, is it successful to only put money into the police force and not into support service?